Throughout history, acts of betrayal have altered the balance of power, influenced wars, and reshaped societies. Individuals once trusted as allies, leaders, or protectors turned against those they served, often triggering consequences that echoed far beyond their own time. These moments remain some of the most consequential turning points in human history. These infamous acts of treachery altered the course of history forever. Join me for today's video. I'm counting down the top 15 greatest acts of betrayal in history. Starting with number 15. Guy Fawkes. Guy Fawkes, also known as Guido Fawkes while fighting for the Spanish, was a member of a group of provincial English Catholics involved in the failed gunpowder plot of 1605. He was born and educated in New York. His father died when Fawkes was 8 years old, after which his mother married a recusant Catholic. Fawkes converted to Catholicism and left for mainland Europe, where he fought for Catholic Spain in the 80 Years' War against Protestant Dutch reformers in the Low Countries. He traveled to Spain to seek support for a Catholic rebellion in England, without success. He later met Thomas Wintour, with whom he returned to England. Wintour introduced him to Robert Catesby, who planned to assassinate King James I and restore a Catholic monarch to the throne. The plotters leased an undercroft beneath the House of Lords. Fawkes was placed in charge of the gunpowder that they stockpiled there. The authorities were prompted by an anonymous letter to search Westminster Palace during the early hours of the 5th of November, and they found Fawkes guarding the explosives. He was questioned and tortured over the next few days, and confessed to wanting to blow up the House of Lords. Fawkes was sentenced to be hanged, drawn, and quartered. However, at his execution on the 31st of January, he died when his neck was broken as he was hanged, with some sources claiming that he deliberately jumped to make this happen. He thus avoided the agony of his sentence. On the 5th of November 1605, Londoners were encouraged to celebrate the king's escape from assassination by lighting bonfires, and an Act of Parliament designated each 5th of November as a day of thanksgiving for the joyful day of deliverance. Fawkes was one of 13 conspirators, but he's the individual most associated with the plot. In Britain, the 5th of November has variously been called Guy Fawkes Night, Guy Fawkes Day, Plot Night, and Bonfire Night. Bonfires were accompanied by fireworks from the 1650s onwards, and it became the custom after 1673 to burn an effigy, usually of the Pope, when their presumptives, James, Duke of York, converted to Catholicism. Effigies of other notable figures have found their way onto the bonfires, such as Paul Kruger, Margaret Thatcher, Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak, and Vladimir Putin. The Guy visage is normally created by children from old clothes, newspapers, and a mask. Number 14. Benedict Arnold. Benedict Arnold was an American-born military officer who served during the American Revolutionary War. He fought with distinction for American Continental Army and rose to the rank of Major General before defecting to the British in 1780. General George Washington had given him his fullest trust and placed in him command of West Point in New York. Arnold was planning to surrender the fort to the British forces, but the plot was discovered in September 1780, whereupon he fled to the British lines. In the latter part of the war, Arnold was commissioned as a brigadier general in the British Army and placed in command of the American Legion. He led the British Army against the soldiers whom he had once commanded, and his name became synonymous with treason and betrayal in the United States. Arnold was born in Connecticut. He was a merchant operating ships in the Atlantic when the war began. He joined the growing American Army outside of Boston and distinguished himself by acts that demonstrated intelligence and bravery. In 1775, he captured Fort Ticonderoga. In 1776, he deployed defensive and delay tactics at the Battle of Valker Island in Lake Champlain that gave American forces time to prepare New York's defenses. His performance in the Battle of Ridgefield in Connecticut prompted his promotion to Major General. He performed operations that provided Americans with relief during the siege of Fort Stanwix and key actions during the pivotal 1777 battles of Saratoga, in which he sustained leg injuries that put him out of combat for several years. However, Arnold mingled with Loyalist sympathizers in Philadelphia and married into the Loyalist family of Peggy Shippen. She was a close friend to British Major John Andre and kept in contact with him when he became head of British espionage system in New York. Many historians see her as having facilitated Arnold's plans to switch sides. He opened secret negotiations with Andre, and she relayed the messages to each other. The British promised £20,000 for the capture of West Point, a major American stronghold. Washington greatly admired Arnold and gave him command of that fort in July 1780. His scheme was to surrender the fort to the British, but it was exposed in September of 1780 when American militiamen captured Andre carrying papers which revealed the plot. Arnold escaped and Andre was hanged. Arnold received a commission as a brigadier general in the British Army, led British forces in the raid on Richmond and nearby areas, burned much of New London, Connecticut to the ground, and slaughtered surrendering forces after the Battle of Groton Heights, just a few miles downriver from the town where he had grown up. In the winter of 1782, he and Peggy moved to London, England. He was well received by King George III and the Tories, but frowned upon by the Whigs and most army officers. In 1787, he moved to Canada to run a merchant business with his sons Richard and Henry. He was extremely unpopular there and returned to London permanently in 1791, where he died 10 years later. Number 13. Ephialtes of Trachis. Ephialtes was the son of Iridemus of Malus. He betrayed his homeland in hope of receiving some kind of reward from the Persians by showing the army of Xerxes a path around the allied Greek position at the pass of Thermopylae, which helped them win the Battle of Thermopylae in 480 BC. The allied Greek land forces, which Herodotus states numbered no more than 4,200 men, had chosen Thermopylae to block the advance of the much larger Persian army. Although this gap between the cliffs was only wide enough for a single carriage, it could be bypassed by a trail that led over the mountains south of Thermopylae and joined the main road behind the Greek position. Herodotus notes that this trail was well known to the locals who had it in the past for raiding the neighboring Thessians. The Persians used the trail to outflank the defenders. The Spartan king Leonidas sent away most of the Greeks, but he himself remained behind with a rearguard composed of 300 men, the Thespian contingent composed of 700 Thespians, and the band detachment comprised of 400 men. Ephialtes expected to be rewarded by the Persians, but this came to nothing when they were defeated at the Battle of Salamis. He then fled to Thessaly, and the Pylians offered a reward for his death. According to Herodotus, he was killed for apparently an unrelated reason by Athenides of Trachis around 470 BC. In the 1962 film The 300 Spartans, Ephialtes was portrayed by Kieran Moore and is depicted as a shady farmhand who worked on a goat farm near Thermopylae. He betrays the Spartans because he was spurned by the Spartan maiden, Elis, thinking he could win her over by dangling riches he thought he would have later. Frank Miller's 1999 comic book miniseries 300, the 2006 film adaptation of the same name, and the 2014 sequel portrayed Ephialtes as a severely deformed Spartan exile whose parents fled to Sparta to protect him from the infanticide he would have surely suffered as a disfigured infant. Leonidas asks him to support his brethren by bringing the wounded water and clearing the dead from the battleground. In anger, Ephialtes swears to prove his parents and Leonidas wrong as he betrays them by revealing to Xerxes a hidden route that the Persian army could use to outflank the Greek defenders. After the betrayal, the name Ephialtes received a lasting stigma. It came to mean nightmare in the Greek language and to symbolize the archetypal traitor in Greek culture, similar to Judas in Christian culture and to Benedict Arnold in the American historical memory. Number 12. Robert Hansen. Robert Philip Hansen was an American FBI agent who spied for Soviet and Russian intelligence services against the U.S. from 1979 to 2001. His espionage was described by the Department of Justice as possibly the worst intelligence disaster in U.S. history. In 1979, 3 years after joining the FBI, Hansen approached the Soviet Main Intelligence Directorate, the GRU, to offer his services, beginning his first espionage cycle, lasting until 1981. He restarted his espionage activities in 1985 and continued until 1991, where he ended communications during the collapse of the Soviet Union, fearing he would be exposed. Hansen restarted communications the next year and continued until his arrest. Throughout his spying, he remained anonymous to Russians. Hansen sold about 6,000 classified documents to the KGB that detailed U.S. strategies in the event of nuclear war, developments in military weapons technologies, and aspects of the U.S. counterintelligence program. He was spying at the same time as Aldrich Ames in the CIA. Both Ames and Hansen compromised the names of KGB agents working secretly for the US, some of whom were executed for their betrayal. Hansen also revealed a multimillion-dollar eavesdropping tunnel built by the FBI under the Soviet embassy. After Ames' arrest in 1994, some of these intelligence breaches remained unsolved, and the search for another spy continued. The FBI paid $7 million to a KGB agent to obtain a file on an anonymous mole, whom the FBI later identified as Hansen through fingerprint and voice analysis. Hansen was arrested on February 18, 2001, at Foxton Park, near his home in Washington, D.C. He was charged with selling U.S. intelligence documents to the Soviet Union and subsequently Russia for more than $1.4 million in cash, diamonds, and Rolex watches over 22 years. To avoid the death penalty, Hansen pleaded guilty to 14 counts of espionage and one of conspiracy to commit espionage. He was sentenced to 15 life terms without the possibility of parole and was incarcerated at ADX Florence until his death in 2023. Number 11. Aldrich Ames. Ames was a former CIA counterintelligence officer and analyst convicted of espionage for the Soviet Union in 1994. His access to military intelligence, CIA assets, and the names of U.S. agents against Russia enabled him to sell valuable information to the Russian government, supporting his and his wife's luxurious lifestyle. Ames regularly assisted another CIA office in assessing Soviet embassy officials as potential intelligence assets. With the knowledge of both the CIA and the FBI, Ames began making contacts within the Soviet embassy. In April 1985, Ames started his espionage activities for the Soviet Union. He provided information he believed was essentially valueless to establish his credentials as a CIA insider in exchange for $50,000, which the Soviets quickly paid. Although Ames initially intended this to be a one-time con game to address his immediate debts, he later admitted that he could not stop after crossing that line. Ames soon identified more than 10 top-level CIA and FBI sources reporting on Soviet activities. He believed betraying these intelligence assets would not only bring him significant money, but also reduce the risk of his own espionage being discovered. As a result, the CIA's network of Soviet bloc agents began disappearing at an alarming rate, including double agents Gennady Veronik and Dmitry Polyakov. While the CIA realized something was wrong, they were initially reluctant to consider the possibility of a mole within their agency. Early investigations focused on potential breaches caused by Soviet bugs or a broken code. Despite spying on the Soviet Union, Ames passed 2 polygraph examinations in 1986 and 1991. However, the CIA eventually focused on Ames after co-workers noticed his improved personal appearance, including cosmetic dentistry and tailor-made suits. They also found it suspicious that despite his $60,000 annual salary, Ames could afford a $540,000 house in Arlington County, Virginia, which he paid for in cash, a $50,000 Jaguar luxury car, and a premium credit card with monthly payments exceeding his salary. Number 10. Mir Jaffer. Mir Syed Jaffer Ali Khan Bahadur was the first dependent of Nawab of Bengal under the British East India Company. His reign is considered by many historians as the beginning of British expansion in the Indian subcontinent, eventually leading to British domination over pre-partition India. Mir Jaffer served as the commander of the under Siraj-ud-Dawla but betrayed him during the Battle of Plassey. After the British victory in 1757, Mir Jaffer ascended to the Masnad, the throne. Initially, Jaffer received military support from the East India Company until 1760, when he failed to meet various British demands. In 1758, Robert Clive discovered that Jaffer had made a treaty with the Dutch East India Company at Shinsura through his agent, Kojo Ajid. Dutch ships were also spotted, leading to disputes that culminated in the Battle of Shinsura. British official Henry Vincitart suggested that Jaffer's son-in-law, Mir Qasim, should act as deputy Sabaha due to Jaffer's inability to manage the difficulties. In October 1760, the company forced Jaffer to abdicate in favour of Qasim. However, Qasim was also overthrown by the East India Company due to trade policy disputes. Jaffer was restored as the Nawab in 1763 with the company's support. Mir Qasim refused to accept this and went to war with the company. Jaffa ruled until his death on February 5, 1765, and is buried in West Bengal. Due to his role in aiding the British colonization of India and contributing to the downfall of the Mughal Empire, Mir Jaffa is widely reviled in the Indian subcontinent, particularly among Bengalis, in both India and Bangladesh. The poet Muhammad Iqbal condemned Mir Jaffa and Mir Sadiq, calling them a stigma on humanity, on religion, and the country. Number 9. Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were an American married couple convicted of espionage for the Soviet Union. They provided top-secret information about American radar, sonar, jet propulsion engines, and nuclear weapon designs. Convicted in 1951, they were executed in 1953 at Sing Sing in New York, becoming the first American civilians executed for espionage, and the first executed during peacetime. Other convicted co-conspirators received prison sentences, including Ethel's brother David Greenglass, who made a plea agreement, Harry Gold, and Morton Sobel. Klaus Fuchs, a German scientist working in Los Alamos, was convicted in the United Kingdom. For decades, many, including the Rosenberg's sons, Michael and Robert, argued that Julius and Ethel were innocent and victims of Cold War paranoia. However, after the fall of the Soviet Union, declassified information included decoded Soviet cables, codenamed Venona, which detailed Julius' role as a courier and recruiter for the Soviets, and Ethel's role as an accessory who helped recruit her brother David into the spy ring, and performed clerical tasks for Julius. Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, vice chairman of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, investigated the Soviet spy ring's impact on the USSR's bomb development. He found that physicist Hans Bethe estimated in 1945 that the Soviets would build a bomb in 5 years. Thanks to information provided by their agents, Moynihan wrote in his book Secrecy, they did it in 4. Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev wrote in his posthumously published memoir that he could not specify the Rosenbergs' contributions, but learned from Joseph Stalin that they had provided very significant help in accelerating the production of our atomic bomb. Number 8. Harold Cole. Harold Cole, also known as Harry Cole, Paul Cole, and by many other aliases, was a petty criminal, confidence man, British soldier, operative of the Pat O'Leary escape line, and an agent of Nazi Germany. In 1940 and 1941, he helped many British soldiers escape France after it surrendered to Nazi Germany during World War II. However, in December 1941, or possibly earlier, he became a double agent for the Germans, betraying about 150 escape line workers and French resistance members to the Gestapo. About 50 of these individuals were executed or died in German concentration camps. Cole has been described as the worst traitor of the war. He deceived both the British and the Germans, escaping from prison several times. Although he survived the war, he was killed while resisting arrest by French police in Paris in January 1946. Harry Neve of MI9 called Cole among the most selfish and callous traitors who ever served the enemy in a time of war. MI9 leader James Langley described Cole as a con-man, thief, and utter shit who betrayed his country to the highest bidder for money. However, some historians speculate that Cole might have been an agent of Britain's secret intelligence services, MI6. They cite evidence that MI6 deputy leader Claude Danzy, who also influenced MI9, opposed executing Cole when the Pat line first proposed it. Unconfirmed claims suggest Danzy prioritized preserving MI6 intelligence gathering operations over the escape lines and tolerated Cole's misdeeds to protect him as an MI6 agent. Some soldiers Cole helped evade German capture defended him. Before defecting to the Germans, Cole was an effective escape line leader, though he was accused of using funds provided by the Pat line for personal expenses. Keith James, author of Conscript Heroes, whose father was a British soldier stranded in France, said, "I will never fully understand how, why, or when Paul Cole defected to the enemy, but as far as my father and other evaders were concerned, he served them well." Number 7. Redl Alfred. Redl was an Austro-Hungarian military officer who rose to lead the Evidence Bureau, the counterintelligence wing of the General Staff of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. He was a prominent figure in pre-World War I espionage, introducing radical innovations and advanced technology to catch foreign spies. However, In 1913, his successor, Major Maximilian Range, discovered that Redl was a highly paid spy for the Imperial Russian Army. Upon being exposed, Redl committed suicide. The motives behind Redl's treason remain unclear. He may have been blackmailed by Russian agents due to his homosexuality, which, if exposed, would have ended his career. Russian military intelligence in Warsaw had known about his homosexuality since 1901 and used this information to coerce him into revealing classified information. In 1902, Redl reportedly passed Austro-Hungarian war plans to the Russians. When General von Gieslingen, head of the Intelligence Bureau, ordered an investigation into the leak, Redl, consulting with his Russian contacts, identified several low-level agents as Russian spies, thereby protecting himself and enhancing his reputation for efficiency. Redl was well compensated by the Russian government, leading to a lifestyle far beyond his official salary. Vanity and a taste for danger also seemed to play a role in his actions. A Russian report from 1907 described him as more sly and false than intelligent and talented, a cynic who enjoys dissipation. From 1903 to 1913, Redl was Russia's leading spy, providing them with Plan 3, the entire Austro-Hungarian invasion plan for Serbia. The Russians informed the Serbian military command about Plan 3, allowing the Serbians to be well prepared for the Austro-Hungarian invasion. Redl not only gave away many of his country's military secrets and plans, but also supplied his own military authorities with incorrect estimates of Russian military strength. 6. John Walker. John Anthony Walker Jr. was a United States Navy chief warrant officer and communications specialist who spied for the Soviet Union from 1967 to 1985. He was convicted of espionage and sentenced to life in prison. In late 1985, Walker made a plea bargain with federal prosecutors, agreeing to provide full details of his espionage activities and testify against his co-conspirator, former senior chief petty officer Jerry Whitworth. In return, prosecutors agreed to a lesser sentence for Walker's son, former seaman Michael Walker, who was also involved in the spying. During his time as a Soviet spy, Walker helped the Soviets decipher over 1 million encrypted naval messages. The New York Times reported in 1987 that his operation is sometimes described as the most damaging Soviet spy ring in history. After Walker's arrest, Caspar Weinberger, President Ronald Reagan's Secretary of Defense, stated that the Soviet Union made significant gains in naval warfare due to Walker's espionage. Weinberger explained that the information Walker provided to Moscow gave the Soviets access to weapons and sensor data and naval tactics, terrorist threats, and surface, submarine, and airborne training, readiness, and tactics. In the June 2010 issue of Naval History magazine, John Prodos, a senior fellow at the National Security Archive in Washington, D.C., noted that after Walker introduced himself to Soviet officials, North Korean forces seized the USS Pueblo to make better use of Walker's spying. Prodos added that North Korea subsequently shared information from the spy ship with the Soviets, enabling them to build replicas and gain access to the U.S. naval communications system, which remained compromised until it was completely revamped in the late 1980s. Number 5. Christian Snukhagroan. Snuk was one of the first Western scholars to deeply immerse himself in Islamic culture and undertake the pilgrimage to Mecca, adopting the name Haji Abdul Ghaffar to collect information. He leveraged his knowledge of Islamic culture to quell Muslim resistance in the Dutch East Indies. His espionage enabled the Dutch to devise strategies to suppress resistance and impose colonial rule in Essa, resulting in nearly 100,000 deaths. Fluent in Arabic, Snuk engaged in meditation with the Ottoman governor in Jeddah and, after being examined by a delegation of scholars from Mecca in 1884, was permitted to undertake the pilgrimage to Mecca in 1885. A pioneering traveler, he was a rare Western presence in Mecca but embraced the culture and religion of his hosts so convincingly that many believed he had converted to Islam. He admitted to pretending to be a Muslim in a letter sent to his college friend on February 18, 1886, now archived in the Heidelberg University Library. In 1888, Snuk became a member of the Royal Netherlands Academy of Arts and Sciences. In 1889, he became a professor of Malay at Leiden University and an official advisor to the Dutch government on colonial affairs. He wrote over 1,400 papers on the situation in Essa and the role of Islam in the Dutch East Indies, the colonial civil service, and nationalism. As an advisor to J.B. Van Hoyts, he played an active role in the final phase of the ISA War. His understanding of Islamic culture helped develop strategies that significantly crushed the resistance and established Dutch colonial rule, ending a 40-year conflict with casualty estimates ranging from 50,000 to 100,000 inhabitants dead and about 1 million wounded. Number 4. Vidkun Quisling. Vidkun Abraham Rorits Johnsen Quisling was a Norwegian military officer, politician, and Nazi collaborator who nominally led the government of Norway during its occupation by Nazi Germany in World War II. He first gained international prominence through his close collaboration with explorer Fyodor Nansen and his efforts to organize humanitarian relief during the Russian famine of 1921. Quisling was later posted as a Norwegian diplomat to the Soviet Union and also managed British diplomatic affairs there for a time. He returned to Norway in 1929 and served as Minister of Defense. In 1933, Quisling founded the fascist party Nationalsamling, National Gathering. Despite gaining some popularity with his attacks on the political left, his party failed to win any seats in the Storting, and by 1940 it remained marginal. On April 9, 1940, during the German invasion of Norway, Quisling attempted to seize power in the world's first radio broadcast coup d'état but failed because the Germans sought to have the recognized Norwegian government legitimize the German occupation, as had been done in Denmark. On February 1, 1942, Quisling formed a second government, approved by the Germans, and served as minister-president, heading the Norwegian state administration alongside the German civil administrator Josef Terboven. His pro-Nazi puppet government, known as the Quisling regime, was dominated by ministers from Nationalsamling in collaboration with Germany's war efforts, including deporting Jews to concentration camps in occupied Poland. After World War II, Quisling was put on trial during Norway's legal purge. He was found guilty of charges including embezzlement, murder, and high treason against the Norwegian state and was sentenced to death. He was executed by firing squad in Oslo on October 24, 1945. Since his death, Quisling has become one of history's most infamous traitors. The term Quisling has become synonymous with collaborator or traitor in several languages, reflecting the widespread contempt for Quislings both during his time and today. Number 3. Wang Jingwei. Wang Xiaoming, widely known by his pen name Wang Jingwei, was a Chinese politician who served as the president of the reorganized national government of the Republic of China, a puppet state of Japan. Initially, Wang was a member of the left-wing Kuomintang, leading a government in Wuhan in opposition to the right-wing government in Nanjing. However, he became anti-communist after his efforts to collaborate with the Chinese Communist Party ended in political failure. Wang was close associate of Sun Yat-sen for the last 20 years of Sun's life. After his death in 1925, Wang engaged in a political struggle with Chiang Kai-shek for control of the Kuomintang but ultimately lost. He remained within the Kuomintang but continued to have disagreements with Chiang until the outbreak of the Second Sino-Japanese War in 1937. Following this, he accepted an invitation from the Japanese Empire to form a Japanese-supported collaborationist government in Nanjing. Wang served as the head of state for this puppet government until his death shortly before the end of World War II. Wang's legacy remains controversial among historians. While he is regarded as an important contributor to the Xinhai Revolution, his collaboration with Imperial Japan is a subject of academic debate. Typical narratives often regard him as a traitor in the War of Resistance, with his name being synonymous with treason. Number 2. Marcus Brutus. Marcus Junius Brutus was a Roman politician, orator, and the most famous of Julius Caesar's assassins. After being adopted by a relative, he used the name Quintus Servilius Carpio Brutus, which remained his legal name, but he is often referred to simply as Brutus. Early in his political career, Brutus opposed Pompey, who was responsible for his father's death, despite also being close to Caesar. Caesar's attempts to evade accountability in the law courts put him at odds with the Roman elite and the Senate, leading Brutus to eventually oppose him. Brutus sided with Pompey against Caesar's forces during the Civil War. After Pompey's defeat at the Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BC, Brutus surrendered to Caesar, who granted him amnesty. As Caesar's behavior became increasingly monarchical and autocratic after the Civil War, several senators, later known as liberators, plotted to assassinate him. Brutus took a leading role in the assassination, which was carried out successfully on the Ides of March 15th of 44 BC. Popular unrest forced Brutus and his brother-in-law, fellow assassin Gaius Cassius Longinus, to leave Rome in April 44 BC. Following a complex political realignment, Octavian, Caesar's adopted son, became consul and, with his colleague, passed a law retroactively declaring Brutus and the other conspirators murderers. This led to a second civil war, with Mark Antony and Octavian fighting the Liberators, led by Brutus and Cassius. The Caesarians decisively defeated Brutus and Cassius' outnumbered armies at the battles of Philippi in October 42 BC. After their defeat, Brutus took his own life. Brutus's name has been condemned for betraying Caesar, his friend and benefactor. In this respect, his name is often rivaled only by Judas Iscariot, with whom he is portrayed in Dante's Inferno. Number 1. Judas Iscariot. Yeah, who else could we have at our number 1 spot? Betrayals don't come more famous than this one. Judas Iscariot, according to Christianity's 4 canonical Gospels, was a first-century Jewish man who became a disciple and one of the original 12 apostles of Jesus Christ. Judas betrayed Jesus to the Sanhedrin in the Garden of Gethsemane by kissing him on the cheek and addressing him as master to reveal his identity in the darkness to the crowd who had come to arrest him in exchange for 30 pieces of silver. Like Brutus, his name is often synonymous with betrayal or treason. The Gospel of Mark gives no motive for Judas' betrayal, but does present Jesus predicting it at the Last Supper, an event also described in all other Gospels. The Gospel of Matthew 26:15 states that Judas committed the betrayal in exchange for 30 pieces of silver. The Gospel of Luke 22.3 and the Gospel of John 13.27 suggest that he was possessed by Satan. According to Matthew 27:1-10, after learning that Jesus was to be crucified, Judas attempted to return the money he had been paid for his betrayal to the chief priests and hanged himself. Due to his notorious role in all the Gospel narratives, Judas remains a controversial figure in Christian history. His betrayal is seen as setting in motion the events that led to Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection, which according to traditional Christian theology, brought salvation to humanity. The Gnostic Gospel of Judas, rejected by the Proto-Orthodox Church as heretical, portrays Judas' actions as done in obedience to instructions given to him by Jesus, suggesting that he alone among the disciples knew Jesus' true teachings. The legacy of betrayal can be seen in political change, cultural memory, and the way history remembers both loyalty and treachery. Many of these events continue to be studied not only for what happened, but for what they reveal about power, trust, and the fragile nature of alliances.